Today I'll be talking about basic drawing materials. When you know the difference in your drawing materials, it'll help you troubleshoot a little bit better on your own, and that will definitely help in your art journey. I'm Samantha Jane at Epic Samantha Studio. Welcome to Art School. In this video, I'll be talking about graphite pencils, erasers, sharpeners, and paper. Also, throughout the video, I'll be introducing pro tips, which are suggestions that come from my own experience. Let's get started. Okay, we're going to quickly run through the different types of pencils that you can have. This one here is one of my favorites. It's an HB. It's fine to have just one pencil. Most pencils at home that you would have, a yellow school pencil would be a 2B pencil, which is fine. It's still toward the middle of the scale. The scale that I'm referring to is the scale here from H to hardness to B to black or blackness of the graphite. And this set here, this is a Prismacolor set. It goes from 9B to H is what I've swatched here for you. I've used this set quite a bit in some of my drawing classes. But the different types of lead are softer. It's not lead, it's actually graphite, but some people still say lead. The graphite is softer here with the 9B, so after using it for a while, the width of your mark gets a little bit wider. With some of the harder pencils, you can see after using them for a while, the width of the stroke is still pretty thin. Which brings me to F, which stands for fine point. So if you have a F pencil in your set, that's what it's for. And what it does is the graphite stays pretty hard. So you can have a fine point tip on it for a while. I did several different swatches with these pencils and I never had to sharpen this one, and it's still got an ultra fine point, whereas you can see down here with the 9, I still didn't sharpen this, but you can see that the width of the stroke is a little bit wider. I've also swatched just one line here of each. You can see how dark it gets. You can get graphite or charcoal. I prefer graphite to start with. It's a little bit easier to work with. It is semi-permanent, meaning that it stays pretty much on the paper after you put it on, but you still can move it around. So it's like an oil painting basically. It's done. It's not dry, so you still can move the paint, but it's not gonna, you can't just like blow on it and it's gonna go away. With the charcoal though, it is very fine. It will mess up as soon as you touch it. It's easily moved around the pigments. So I've even shown here where I've smudged the graphite and I could get it close to the edge of the circle, but the charcoal though, I had about the same amount of material in the paper and it was really easy to get that charcoal to the edge of the circle. Also, charcoal is more black than graphite. Graphite has a sheen and it's gray. So that's a little bit of the difference there. I also show here a swatch of a graphite stick. I believe mine is a 6B, and I'm going to hold this with a cloth because it gets graphite everywhere. But it's good if you want to make a wide area of graphite. You could lay it on its side, which is what I did here, and then you can smooth it out, and it puts a lot of graphite on the paper for you. And there's just a line, so if you wanted like a thick, more rustic line, you could use the edge of one of these sticks. Here's a pro tip for when you are using your pencils. You don't want to scribble back and forth. And here's the example. I scribbled back and forth here to color this part of the circle, and you can see how choppy. You can see that there's little hooks on the end of the stroke. It doesn't fill your area very well. This here on this side, I use singular strokes, and so the pencil, the pencil lays down really well, and then if you go back over it at about a 45-degree angle, you can make some of your lines disappear. This is called cross hatching. You do it with marker, so this is actually done with marker here. So the example would be if I wanted to shade this area, I could actually come back in at a different angle. You can go straight up and down, but really a 45-degree angle or so is pretty good to shade in. And I can get closer here to the strokes and it shades this area more. If you go farther away, space it out more, it's less of a shaded area. So the idea, the same here with graphite, it's just that you can cover more area. It looks a lot cleaner, whereas scribbling, you can cover the area, but I don't know, you get a lot better texture, I feel, with this. And I learned that in one of the art classes, to not scribble, and it really changed the way that I did my artwork. So here's a basic range of graphite. You can get different pencil sets. I prefer my Prisma set here. I feel when I'm using these, some other pencils from different companies that I've used, sometimes after using them for a while, they feel the tip of it is not smooth on the paper. It feels like something's catching on the paper, like having a rock in your shoe almost, which I didn't really like the feeling of. So I feel like these are pretty smooth. This is a Caran d'Ache, which, like I said earlier, is one of my favorite pencils to use when I'm sketching. Their graphite is pretty smooth as well. These are a little bit pricier. I believe you can get a set of Prismacolors for like $10 to $15. So that's graphite and pencils for you. If you have any questions, please put them in the comments down below. Okay, now we're going to talk about erasers. I've made a swatch of graphite here so we can take a look and see what each eraser does. Here's a list of not all the erasers, but most popular erasers that are out there. So the first eraser that you'll see, which is a pretty common one, it's one of my favorites. It's a white plastic eraser. Sometimes they're called PVC or vinyl. This is my super favorite eraser to use right now, which is a Tombow eraser. It says non-PVC eraser. So a lot of times these are vinyl. It doesn't say for sure, or if it does, it is in Japanese. But I like these because I feel like they erase fairly cleanly, and you have to be careful with your paper. Some of these will actually ruin your paper. This here is sketch paper, so most of the erasers will be fine with the paper that I'm using. But for example, here I've got my white plastic eraser, and it does a pretty good job. When you are erasing, you don't have to rub really hard on the paper. As a matter of fact, just some light passes, and you don't need to always take up all the graphite. So I'm kind of making a little example here of what an eraser drawing is, and it's helpful to know that you don't always have to pick up all the graphite, especially if you're doing a drawing like this. So you've got plastic there. Next is a rubber eraser. The pink erasers most people have at home are rubber. This one here is a classic pink pearl. This erases also pretty cleanly. Doesn't grab as much of the graphite as the plastic eraser does. You can always clean the tip that's dirty. You can clean it by rubbing it on a surface like a desktop, and that'll get it somewhat clean. Kids in school used to rub them on their jeans, any sort of surface where you can get a little bit of friction on. And don't ruin a good countertop by doing this. Do it on a surface that you can, that you do a lot of arts and crafts on. Now, something that's nice that I've done here, and I'll explain here why it's cut. You can actually cut erasers, so if you get a dirty part like this, you can take a utility knife and be very careful. You can cut this extra dirty part off, just a little shave, and then you now have a clean eraser. Also, you can make a fine point tip for your eraser if you need to get into detailed spots. And you can do this with the vinyl erasers too. I've done that before. Here's an example of an older eraser I've cut several times to kind of help get a clean surface or to get a finer tip on. So you have your rubber eraser. I don't have a gum eraser. I did look through all of my art stuff. You can use those too. They work well, like the rubber and the plastic. They do tend to crumble though, and that's probably why I don't have any. I don't like the crumbliness. I'd rather be able to cut an eraser like this. It's easier for me to utilize them that way. So then you also have black erasers, which are usually a form of plastic. This one here, it's rubbed off, but it was a Prismacolor Scholar eraser. This one was advertised to really help with colored pencil. A lot of times the waxy pigments of color pencils are hard to get off of paper, and so sometimes these black erasers will do the trick. Also, black erasers have been known to take off like a ballpoint pen ink. Alcohol-based ink markers, like permanent markers, though, it doesn't really do the trick with. It works a little bit differently. But there you have some black erasers. The next type of eraser is called an electric eraser, and you may wonder what that is. Well, let me show you. Here is an electric eraser. The tip, once you press the button on the side here, the tip spins. And you have to be careful with these because they can ruin your paper quickly because it spins. It can tear up the surface and actually rip a hole in your paper if you're not careful. So an electric eraser, though, is nice for fine detail. It comes with refills. It's got this little clip. This here is a plastic vinyl eraser, and so you can move it up if you need some extra space. Just plug it back in and spin, and there you go. So I will do a little example here. I'm just touching the paper very lightly because, again, I don't want to actually rub a hole in my paper, but these do erase pretty cleanly. So that's a nice little way to get a nice fine point in very clean area. If you need to, eraser dust can be a problem. I always like to take a clean brush and just kind of dust my surface. You want to do it lightly because graphite, and if you do use charcoal, that can be moved around. You can see I've already moved it back onto some of the erased area here. But it is nice. It's better than using your hand. You don't want to get the backside of your hand all covered in charcoal or graphite. So use this or lightly brush with a paper towel or a spare cloth if you have. Okay, so we are on to mechanical erasers, which are nice because they work much like a mechanical pencil, and they also erase fine detail. So here I've got an eraser also by Tombow. This one's nice because it's got a flat edge to it. Some erasers you can get are more round like this. But here we have our Tombow. We'll make like a little shiny spot here. This is a really crappy apple. Don't judge me. Just to show you that you can actually make a drawing with an eraser is kind of the point here. But here again, this is nice when you need to make a eraser drawing to get these fine points. Like a stylus almost, you can use it to write if you wanted to. So that's kind of cool. Dust off the dust here. Tombow is really cool, and also a way that they make an eraser called dust catch. So as you're erasing, the eraser dust kind of balls up at the end of your eraser and it kind of comes off in one big chunk versus having all of this little dust on the paper. These regular, like the Tombow mono erasers, these white plastic ones, they actually do a pretty good job of keeping the eraser dust down. Okay, so then we have a regular pencil eraser, which is similar to the mechanical eraser, but this is actually encased in wood and can be shaved down. I guess this is nice because you have more control over if you have a really fine tip point or a wider tip point. Works just like the mechanical pencil and the mechanical eraser in the way that you can get really fine details, so you wouldn't want to do a large space with something like this. But this is the pink rubber eraser, so I think the pink rubber does a really good job too of bringing up the graphite or charcoal in small spaces. And then we are on to kneaded erasers, which is probably my favorite eraser to play with because it is like putty. And so the more you stretch it, the cleaner it becomes. It kind of renews the surface. And I would say you probably should stretch these out quite a bit just to keep them moldable. they can get kind of grimy and oily over time and harder to knead. In that case, you just get a new one. You can get one for a couple bucks. They often come in a plastic package like this. The one I have here came in a hard case, which I love because these are super sticky. So if you put it in something, you want to make sure it's like a hard plastic case like this, because it will, like, it even leaves remnants in here, so it will stick to stuff. It'll get in between the fibers of cloth, and you don't want it to pick up a lot of dust or fiber, so I wouldn't wrap it in like a paper towel or anything. Anyway, kneaded erasers are nice because you can make a finer tip with them. These do not erase as cleanly as, I would say, the mechanical or the electric eraser, but it does kind of help you when you're trying to shade. So for example, if I want to make kind of a shaded area over here, I don't want to lift up all of the graphite, just some of it. I'm just going to start dabbing this on the paper, rubbing kind of lightly, and then even lighter here to kind of get some of that gradient area going. You can also kind of use this to smudge the charcoal. Like when this gets dirty with charcoal or graphite, you can kind of smudge it around versus erasing. So when that does get dirty though, all you have to do is knead it, kind of turn it in on itself there, and remold your point. And you can go back in. And you can kind of clean up some of this area that you left dirty before. And again, you can see it's not getting it completely clean like some of these finer detail areas. So a kneaded eraser is kind of in between getting a clean erase and shading. I think it's best used for shading. So you can see there we kind of have a nice gradient, and kind of come in over here and lift some of the graphite. You can press it on the paper and you can see where it's lifted up some, but not all of it. And then last but not least, again, this is not the entire exhaustive list of erasers. I'm sure there are a ton of different things out there. You can also get sand erasers. Sand erasers will mess your paper up, but it does get you right back down to the surface. But the last thing I have here is an eraser stencil. And what that does, it looks like this. This is not the only one that you can get, but these are pretty common. I'm going to use my eraser, my eraser pencil with this, and you're just going to lay it on your area. Make sure to grip it pretty good, and then erase within the area. I think sometimes these are also called maybe eraser guards. We all have the habit of using our fingers to dust away that dust there, which in this case is probably fine. In other cases, you would really want to be careful not to smudge your artwork or get eraser dust everywhere. I'm going to use the electric eraser on these dots here to get a cleaner erase. Okay, that created a lot of dust, but it did the trick. Go in with that brush again, clean up my area. Okay, now you can see I've got a pretty clean erase here. I really like doing those dots because it really kind of gives it some detail there. That would look really cool as like rivets on maybe like some robot gear or something, you know, like a robot arm. Now he's got some rivets in there. Little arm joint there. Anyway, so you can see there's a lot of different versatility of the erasers. They all have their different purposes. Some are better for paper than others, but you can see then this is how you use different erasers. For most people, I would say a pink eraser is fine, but if you have a couple extra pennies, pinch them together and get yourself a plastic eraser. It is my fave. Okay, we're going to take a quick moment to go over some pencil sharpeners. I know it sounds pretty basic, but sharpeners do matter. Okay, so most of the time you're going to get in a kit a basic metal sharpener. This one here is by the brand Cum, K-U-M. I might be saying it wrong, but most kits will have a sharpener like this. It's fine. Stick the pencil in. It does not have a shavings catch. Now this one's making me shave the pencil at an angle, which I'm not super fond of because it can make you sharpen your pencil unevenly. But nonetheless, it does the job. See, it kind of eats the wood away here. So it's not quite my favorite sharpener to use, but it works in a pinch. What I would recommend, if you're going to get a sharpener that you can take with you that has a shavings catch on it, I would recommend this here. This is a comb sharpener also. And I'm actually going to use this on one of my favorite pencils because I trust this sharpener. So it's got a 1-2 step. This is the automatic long point. And it's called that because my pencil's pretty sharp right now. So I'll show you here that you can, it's not the sharpest. So if I just want to sharpen that point up, I'm just going to stick it on side 2 and kind of get that a little bit sharper here. Maybe that's got some stuff in it. But if I can't quite get a sharp enough point that way, I'm going to stick it in side 1. Side 1 is going to actually peel back the wood for me. Again, this is also making me kind of sharpen at an angle. So that peeled back the wood quite a bit. So now I'm going to go in side 2. And really get a fine point on that sucker. So I really like these because it will help you get a fine point if you need it. Again, you don't have to sharpen your pencil to the finest point because a lot of times if you press too hard on that point, it's going to break anyway. It can indent your paper. Chipping graphite can maybe make a mark where you didn't want it to. So you don't always have to sharpen to the finest point, even though it is very satisfying. My favorite type of sharpener though is going to be this bad boy. This is a manual pencil sharpener. So this is much like the kind that you would probably have on your wall at school. So I'll show you. It's got this rotating action on the inside here. Let's see if I can get this back in. This guy's kind of rough. Okay, now I'm back in action. Sorry, this thing is really hard to get apart and back in. It's not hard to get apart, but this wheel is super hard to get back in. Sometimes you have to take it out though because your lead can get stuck. It's not the perfect sharpener, but it is super great. It does have this little drawer here. There's nothing that really keeps this closed, so you got to be careful. This is an inexpensive version when it comes to talking about these. This is about $20. Caran d'Ache makes one that's like $150. So you just need like the $20 one. It's fine for what you need. It does come with a little grip, a vice grip that you can put on the edge of a table. I like mine freestanding. So let me get to the point. The reason why I like this type of sharpener is because you will avoid things like this. You see how the wood is uneven on one side? That's from sharpening your pencil at an angle. It's not the pencil's fault. Normally the graphite is in the center of the wood. So here's what happens. Here's how you use this. You pull this out here by gripping the tabs together. You stick the pencil in. You let the tabs go, and the tab will grip your pencil where it's at, hands free. Now the great part about this is going to hold your pencil at an even angle to the pencil sharpener so it doesn't tilt and have your pencil sharpen at the wrong angle, which is why I love this. So it is a little noisy, and you'll see here after I'm done cranking, it will kind of be a little bit smoother, and that's how you know it's done at a fine point. So you can kind of see it slowly bringing that pencil in towards the sharpener. It's still kind of hard to crank here, and then it just loosened up. So I know that the pencil is now sharp. Now, all of the sides are even. I still have a little bit of that wood at the top there. After probably a couple of uses and bringing that down, it'll be much more even again. But it did a really great job on that pencil. I'll have one more here that's also got a little bit of uneven wood. And again, just stick it in. 3 or 4 cranks and you're good to go. And that pencil is much more even. That solid point on there, it helps. That's got a really even shave in the middle. It really helps, especially when you have softer pencils like the Prismacolor pencils. Those cores are ultra soft and they will break a million times. So like 9 times out of 10 with something like this, my lead would eventually break with the Prisma pencils. But with this, I would say I'm closer to like maybe 2 times out of 10. They still break, and that's why you have to take the back part out to kind of clear out that chamber so you can sharpen again. But definitely worth the $20 if you're going to be drawing all the time like I do. Okay, we're going to take just a few minutes here to go over the different types of papers. We're just going to go over just a few examples here because there's like a million different types of paper that you can get. If you have copy paper at home, that's fine. It's usually about a 20-pound paper. The different pounds of paper are the thicknesses. Sometimes it also refers to the amount of water that it can hold. So watercolor paper will be a higher poundage versus like a sketch paper. So again, copy paper, you can get it in different thicknesses. Most basic copy paper is about 20 pounds or so. Sketch paper is, this one here in particular is a 50-pound paper, and I'm going to take my graphite stick here. I know that they probably actually make holders for these, but I'm just going to use my paper towel so my fingers don't get dirty. This is about a 6B, so it's a little soft, and that's why I want to use it. I want to show you the different tooth patterns that it will make with the paper. So this here is pretty smooth. You can see it's got some chunks and bites missing there, so the paper's got some pretty good tooth. It grabs the graphite pretty well. I'm going to use just a regular HB pencil. So this is gliding over this paper pretty easily. So this is 50-pound sketch paper. It also comes in grams. This is 74 grams. This here is drawing paper, and I don't know if you can see this very well, but when I compare the thicknesses of them, this one here is a little bit more transparent than this one. That's because the drawing paper is 80 pounds. It's a little bit thicker than my sketch paper. It's about 130 grams. It's got just a little bit more tooth than the sketch paper. They're pretty much about the same smoothness, and I'll kind of put my finger here. You can kind of hear it's pretty smooth there. So here is my graphite test, and then my HB pencil. Still pretty smooth compared to this one here. Looks like this has got a little bit more tooth to it because it's got more spacing there and that graphite streak. Okay, next we have pastel paper. This is my pro tip. Pastel paper often comes in different colors. This one here is kind of like a pinkish gray color. And I like to use this with graphite drawings because graphite's on a grayscale, and sometimes when you put it on a colored paper like this, it can give it a little pop. This here is 98-pound paper. It does have quite a bit more texture. You can kind of hear the difference in smoothness there. Take my graphite stick, swatch. You can see almost the little bubbles, the indents in the paper, not raised, it's indented. And you can see that that's picking up actually quite a bit of graphite in between. It's just on those indents there, it's not where it's picking it up. So just to kind of give you an example of the texture, and then it's a little bit bumpier for my pencil, but again, it gives it some color, some texture. It's kind of a nice paper to work with when you're doing pencil drawings. Pastels though, you would want a paper like this if you're using like a pastel or a charcoal even, because it is grabbing more of that product and laying it down on the paper. And here we have Pastel Card. This stuff is like fine grade sandpaper. It's very textured. It sounds like sandpaper. But the grit is really fine, so you won't get a lot of indents like you will with the pastel paper here. It's going to make a really smooth line, but it also is grabbing a ton of that graphite. Look how dark that is. And that's not even a charcoal, that's just the graphite. But because of the grittiness of the paper, it's just grabbing that graphite from that stick. So this here won't be as bumpy as far as like bumpy textured line, and this even is almost leaving like a gritty residue on my fingers. And this is quite thick. This is almost like cardboard. This only came in grams. Since my pastel paper was 160 grams, I have another paper in here. It's like a watercolor or Bristol. I'm gonna guess that this is about a 200-pound paper. I wouldn't use this for watercolor, even though it'll hold some moisture. This, I would just say the thickness is what's really making a difference there. So next up here, I do have some watercolor paper. This is 140 pounds. That's what it was. This is 300 grams. So I'm guessing this is close to, like, I don't know. I don't know the conversion, but I'm saying I think that's close to 200 if this is 140. So this here does have some tooth to it. It's not 100% smooth. This is also probably okay to do sketching on. You don't need the thickness of it though. It is a pretty thick paper, not quite as thick as this pastel paper. This is almost like cardboard here. And even this pastel paper, it's thick but not super thick. So I'm gonna say this watercolor is right in between. It's fairly smooth. It's grabbing some of that graphite there. So there's not a like spaces in between. Very smooth with a HB pencil. This does hold quite a bit of water though, which we'll go over watercolors in another video. But if you want to pick this up as just a nice drawing paper, you can. Bristol is very smooth. You don't hear a lot of feedback there. So it's very smooth paper. This is really good for like ink and markers and things like that. It is thick like a watercolor paper. As a matter of fact, this is 100 pounds versus 140. So now that I look at this, yeah, the 270 grams versus the 300, and this is a little bit thicker still. So this is very smooth though. You can see there's not a lot of grip from that graphite. And just a really smooth line there. But I would say if you're trying to like blend, that this doesn't want to blend very well because there's not a lot of tooth to grip that fine dust. Whereas you can see that's got quite a bit of movement there. And the difference is the tooth and the paper. I don't know if I can really even show you the difference in textures here, but the watercolor paper definitely has some smoothness, but not as smooth as that Bristol. So that's why you want a paper with more tooth. And I'll show you here again, because this picked up quite a bit of graphite dust. So you can see these are kind of the reasons why you'd want more tooth in your paper, because you get that blend going on pretty easily. So there's some different ranges of paper. Again, a copy paper is fine, but I think a good drawing paper around 70 to 100 pounds should be great for most of the artwork that you'd like to do. Now that you know the basics about drawing materials, the next lesson will be on contour drawing exercises. These exercises are not only great for beginners, but great as warm-ups for more experienced artists. Below you'll find a PDF guide that goes with this video. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe to see what I post next. And don't forget, all that matters is if you art from the heart. P.S. I may have cheated a little bit. This ring light is totally killing my awesome non-glare vibe. So I'm an optician by day, and I totally popped out my lenses out of my glasses. Pro tip, no more glare.